The relentless, shimmering kaleidoscope of New York City streamed past Maya Rodriguez's 11th floor window. The constant symphony of honking taxis, distant sirens, and the muffled roar of the subway deep beneath Manhattan's concrete veins was the backdrop to her perpetual anxiety. Tonight, however, the city's pulse felt especially amplified. Tomorrow marked the first day of her unpaid internship at Sterling and Thorne LLP, a prestigious law firm whose name gleamed in gilded letters on the polished glass doors of a skyscraper in Midtown. For Maya, a driven but deeply introspective law student battling pervasive social anxiety, the prospect of navigating such a high-stakes, intimidating environment felt akin to preparing for a courtroom trial where she was the defendant. Her small, meticulously organized apartment, typically a sanctuary from the urban clamor, tonight felt like a pressure cooker. Instead of celebrating with classmates at pre-graduation parties or late-night study sessions that morphed into relaxed banter, Maya was immersed in a solitary ritual. She obsessively rearranged her legal binders, color-coding them by case type, her fingers tracing the neat labels. She ironed and re-ironed the crisp white blouse and tailored skirt she planned to wear, scrutinizing every crease. Then, she would stand before her full-length mirror, practicing reassuring smiles, rehearsing introductions, whispering affirmations to herself like incantations against the looming social labyrinth. You belong here. You earned this. Just breathe. The tension in her shoulders was a constant knot, a physical manifestation of the mental battle she waged against herself. Her solitary evenings were not a choice, but a consequence of a deep-seated fear of missteps, of being judged, of simply existing awkwardly in a world that seemed to demand effortless confidence. The quiet hum of her ancient air conditioner was her only companion, a steady counterpoint to the racing thoughts in her mind. The faint aroma of stale coffee and new legal textbooks filled the air, a scent that, paradoxically, brought her a strange comfort. This was her world, a world of logic, precedent, and the reassuring solidity of legal texts, far removed from the unpredictable nuances of human interaction. Yet tomorrow, that carefully constructed world would collide with the glittering, demanding reality of a top-tier law firm. On her first day, Maya arrived at Sterling and Thorne LLP an hour before her official start time, driven by a neurotic fear of being late. The lobby was a temple of polished marble and hushed efficiency, its opulence a stark reminder of the firm's power. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors, her heart thumping against her ribs, until she found the bustling intern bullpen. The other interns, a mix of confident Ivy Leaguers and polished go-getters, chatted easily amongst themselves, their laughter echoing off the glass partitions. Maya, true to form, found a vacant desk in the furthest corner, hoping to blend into the background. She was assigned to grunt work organizing deposition transcripts, photocopying endless stacks of documents, and running coffee errands. It was exactly what she expected from an unpaid internship at a firm like this, a rite of passage. Her meticulous nature made her efficient at these tasks, a quiet, almost invisible worker bee. As she was refiling a stack of seemingly innocuous documents in the firm's main records room, a large, echoing space filled with rows of meticulously labeled boxes, she overheard a hushed conversation between two junior associates, huddled near a distant filing cabinet. Their voices, though low, carried in the cavernous room. It's a disaster. Mark. That Castillo family eviction case, one associate, a weary-looking man in his late 20s, whispered. The landlord, Sterling's client, found some obscure loophole in the old city ordinance. Said they missed a specific type of notification for the rent increase. It's a technicality, but legally, it holds up. The Castillos are practically destitute. Right? Mark replied, his voice laced with sympathy. Immigrant family. 5 kids. Where are they supposed to go? And this landlord, a notorious slumlord. They're being kicked out just to hike up the rent for new tenants. Yeah, it's brutal, morally reprehensible, but legally clean, according to Julian's team. The first associate sighed. We tried everything. Judge is siding with the landlord on the letter of the law, Unless we find something, anything, a hidden detail, a technicality of our own. But we've exhausted all avenues. Maya felt a sharp pang in her chest. The injustice of it, the cold, impersonal application of the law to ruin a vulnerable family's life, resonated deeply with her own quiet sense of fairness. It wasn't her case. She was just an intern, utterly powerless in the grand scheme of things. She could easily have ignored it, focused on her assigned tasks, and allowed the firm's internal dynamics to play out. No one expected an intern to solve a case. But the image of that family, innocent and desperate, burned in her mind. It was a small, personal battle, but one that stirred her dormant courage, her inherent drive to seek justice for the unseen. During her lunch break, instead of joining the other interns in the bustling cafeteria, Maya sequestered herself in a quiet corner of the firm's extensive legal library. She knew she shouldn't be looking into an unassigned case, but the compulsion was overwhelming. She discreetly accessed the public records database, pulling up the publicly available filings for the Castillo eviction case. She devoured the legal jargon, the dense paragraphs of ordinances and procedural codes, her eyes scanning for any inconsistency, any overlooked detail. She paid particular attention to the notification process, the loophole the landlord had exploited. The old city ordinance was archaic, written decades ago. As she read, a tiny discrepancy, a forgotten provision concerning the method of notice delivery for certain types of residential leases, snagged her attention. It was obscure, buried deep in a footnote, easily missed by even seasoned lawyers relying on modern legal databases that often summarized such older provisions. The landlord's legal team had used a common, but in this very specific, archaic context, technically flawed method of notification. It was a microscopic needle in a haystack of legal text, a dot that didn't seem to connect. But for Maya, the dot shimmered with significance. Without a moment's hesitation, her anxiety momentarily eclipsed by a fierce drive for justice. Maya quickly typed up a concise, anonymous memo. It outlined the precise legal provision, cited the specific ordinance number, and explained, with compelling clarity, how the landlord's notification method was procedurally deficient under that obscure clause. She didn't include her name. She didn't want credit, didn't want attention. She just wanted the family to have a chance. She slipped the memo into the internal mail slot for the junior associate she had overheard discussing the case. Her act was simple, selfless, and driven by a profound sense of right and wrong, solidifying her quiet integrity in the reader's mind. A week later, as Maya was meticulously organizing case files in a quiet corner of the office, she overheard a familiar voice. It was the same junior associate she'd anonymously helped, talking animatedly on the phone. "Can you believe it? The Castillo eviction. We won," the associate exclaimed, his voice incredulous. "The judge sided with us. That tiny procedural error, the notification delivery method, it was enough. Total victory. The family gets to stay." He paused, listening. "No, I have no idea who found it. Just showed up as an anonymous memo in my mailbox. Brilliant, whoever it was. Saved the whole case." Maya, hidden behind a stack of binders, felt a warm flush spread through her. A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. Her eyes, usually darting with apprehension, held a flicker of quiet triumph. She continued to work, seemingly absorbed in her task, but a faint, almost imperceptible hum of contentment resonated within her. That night, alone in her apartment, she recalled the strange feeling she'd had while reading the Castillo case files. It wasn't just logical deduction, it was something more. A pattern recognition that felt almost intuitive. She remembered her childhood, how she'd sometimes noticed tiny, unlinked details in complex puzzles or intricate tapestries, details that everyone else missed, only for them to be the key to the whole picture. Her grandmother, a wise old woman who often saw more than she let on, used to call it her gift for unseen connections. You see the dots others miss. "Little one," her grandmother would say, and you know how they link up, even when the lines aren't drawn. It was a quiet ability, a subtle talent that had often set her apart, making her feel different, sometimes even isolated. But in the hushed silence of her apartment, with the distant city lights twinkling like scattered stars, Maya recognized this peculiar knack, this innate capacity to find the missed connections, the overlooked details, as a hidden strength. It was a secret she rarely spoke of, a talent whose full power was yet to be unveiled, and it hinted at a depth of potential that the bustling law firm and its famous lawyers were utterly oblivious to. The victory in the obscure Castillo eviction case, though achieved anonymously, cast a faint, almost imperceptible glow over Maya's otherwise quiet existence at Sterling and Thorne LLP. It was a private validation, a secret affirmation of her unique analytical prowess. She continued to navigate the polished corridors of the firm, a diligent shadow, observing the intricate dance of power and precedent that unfolded daily. The city outside remained a constant, vibrant hum, oblivious to the quiet drama playing out within the glass towers. Weeks bled into a month, and the legal world of Sterling and Thorne braced itself for a seismic event. News rippled through the firm. Then the wider legal community Sterling and Thorne had landed their biggest case in years. It was a high-stakes intellectual property lawsuit, pitting Innovatech Solutions, a sprawling tech conglomerate, against a formidable rival, Apex Innovations. Billions of dollars were on the line, along with the very future of Innovatech's groundbreaking neural network technology. The case was a Goliath, demanding every ounce of legal acumen the firm possessed. The immense pressure of the case settled like a heavy cloak over the firm's Manhattan offices. Every attorney, every paralegal, every intern felt the heightened tension. The weight of expectation, the sheer magnitude of the stakes, was palpable. Naturally, the case was assigned to the firm's undisputed titan, attorney Julian Sterling, a living legend in legal circles. Sterling was known for his razor-sharp intellect, his formidable courtroom presence, and an ego as polished and imposing as the firm's marble lobby. He possessed an almost supernatural ability to dissect complex legal arguments and dismantle opposing counsel. However, his brilliance was often accompanied by an unyielding arrogance, a dismissive contempt for anyone he perceived as less intelligent, less experienced, or, crucially, less conventionally successful than himself. He trusted his own judgment implicitly, and his track record rarely proved him wrong. The initial strategy meeting for the Innovatech case was a grand affair, held in the firm's largest conference room. The air crackled with anticipation. Julian Sterling, impeccably tailored and radiating an almost regal confidence, presided over a table laden with thick legal binders and flickering laptop screens. All the firm's senior partners and key associates were present, along with the nervous cohort of interns, including Maya, relegated to seats along the wall, intended to absorb rather than contribute. Julian began with a masterful overview of the case, dissecting Apex Innovations' claims of patent infringement with surgical precision. He outlined their counter-arguments, the legal loopholes they intended to exploit, and the mountain of technical data they needed to navigate. Finally, he opened the floor for initial research ideas, a customary nod to collaborative effort, though his dismissive glances at the intern section suggested it was more a formality than a genuine invitation for input. Most interns offered variations of standard research avenues, recent precedents in tech patent law, analysis of intellectual property statutes, deep dives into corporate espionage history. Their voices were eager, but tentative, hoping to impress the legendary Sterling. Maya listened intently, her mind working on a different frequency. As Julian spoke, her peculiar knack for seeing the unseen connections began to hum. A distant memory stirred within her, a faint echo from a forgotten corner of her vast, self-built legal library. It was a vague recollection of an obscure, decades-old legal precedent, seemingly unrelated to tech law, but involving a subtle nuance of intent in the application of proprietary information. The details were hazy, buried under layers of more conventional legal knowledge. But the feeling of its potential relevance was strong, an almost visceral intuition. A wave of internal conflict washed over Maya. Her social anxiety screamed at her to remain silent, to avoid drawing attention, especially from someone as intimidating as Julian Sterling. He had a reputation for brutally dissecting ideas, particularly those he deemed foolish. The last thing she wanted was to be publicly ridiculed, to have her fragile confidence shattered. Yet, the conviction that this obscure precedent held a key, a potentially game-changing angle for Innovatech, was equally powerful. The image of the Castillo family, grateful and vindicated, flashed in her mind. This wasn't just about her, or her internship. It was about billions of dollars, and the potential ruin of a major tech company. Her quiet sense of justice, a fierce desire for truth to prevail, urged her forward. Hesitantly, her hand, small and trembling slightly, rose into the air. It felt monumental in the hushed intensity of the conference room. Julian Sterling, mid-sentence, paused. His gaze, sharp as a laser, cut across the room, landing on Maya. His expression was one of mild annoyance, tinged with a flicker of condescension. Yes, intern. Do you have a groundbreaking insight to share? His tone was laced with thinly veiled sarcasm. Maya's cheeks flushed, but she forced herself to speak, her voice soft but clear, imbued with a quiet conviction that surprised even herself. Mr. Sterling, I was wondering if we might explore precedents involving cases that, while seemingly unrelated to direct patent infringement, touched upon the concept of malicious intent or unethical application of legally obtained information, rather than just the act of infringement itself. I recall a very old case, vaguely, that dealt with a subtle twist on that principle. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Senior associates exchanged bewildered glances. Malicious intent. In a tech patent case, it was a wild, unconventional thought. Julian Sterling let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that sliced through the tension. He leaned back in his chair, a look of profound amusement on his face. Malicious intent. Intern. Are you suggesting we argue that Apex Innovations intended to be unethical with their use of our client's intellectual property, rather than simply proving they infringed upon it? My dear, that's naive, and frankly, a waste of valuable time and resources. He shook his head slowly, a dismissive smile playing on his lips. This isn't a morality play. It's a patent lawsuit. We deal in hard facts, precise legal definitions, and clear lines of infringement, not vague notions of intent or subtle twists. Perhaps you should stick to organizing files for now. We need practical, applicable legal strategy, not fanciful diversions from someone who clearly hasn't grasped the fundamentals of corporate law. He then turned back to his senior team, explicitly dismissing Maya's idea with a wave of his hand. His gaze barely lingered on her, as if she were already in irrelevance. The public dismissal struck Maya like a physical blow. Her face burned, her stomach churned. The humiliation was searing, but beneath it, a furious defiance began to simmer. He had called her naive, a waste of time. He had dismissed her intuition, her ability to see the connections others missed, as useless. The injustice of it, the blind arrogance of his dismissal, was almost unbearable. She felt a profound sense of powerlessness, a raw frustration at being sidelined, her potential ignored. Yet, Julian Sterling's contempt solidified her resolve. She knew her intuition was rarely wrong. She had seen the overlooked details before, and they had always proved crucial. The idea of letting this critical case, and by extension, Innovatech, suffer because of his closed-mindedness was unacceptable. She could not simply go back to photocopying. The possibility that the one legal precedent she vaguely remembered could win their biggest case weighed heavily on her. This profound conviction, coupled with the crushing humiliation she'd just endured, was the point of no return. She would not, could not, ignore it. She had to find that precedent, to prove its relevance. Not just to validate herself, but to save the case from Julian Sterling's own hubris. Her quiet, internal battle for recognition had just escalated into a full-blown, clandestine quest for justice within the very firm that doubted her. The cutting edge of Manhattan's legal world, embodied by the gleaming glass and steel of Sterling and Thorne LLP, buzzed with the frantic energy of the Innovatech case. Julian Sterling and his hand-picked team of senior associates plunged into the digital depths of legal research, their high-powered AI platforms churning through millions of recent precedents, patents, and technical specifications. They were convinced the answer lay in the newest data, the most contemporary rulings. For them, the legal landscape was a constantly updating algorithm. But for Maya, the legal landscape was a vast, multi-layered archaeological dig. Her intuition about the obscure precedent, dismissed so scornfully by Sterling, gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that the key to this multi-billion-dollar case lay not in the shiny new databases, but in the dustier, forgotten corners of legal history. Her social anxiety, usually a paralyzing force, receded in the face of this intellectual obsession. The pursuit of this elusive truth became her anchor, a silent defiance against the firm's dismissive atmosphere. She began her clandestine search in the firm's rarely used physical law library, a cavernous space filled with towering shelves of leather-bound volumes, their pages crackling with age. It was a stark contrast to the sleek, digital interfaces the other interns used. Maya didn't search by keywords. She didn't even have a precise case name in mind. Instead, she searched by patterns, by the subtle nuances of legal reasoning that resonated with her vague recollection. She looked for cases that, on the surface, seemed unconnected to intellectual property, perhaps contract disputes, or even property law cases, but which involved a fundamental argument about a party's intent to misuse or misapply a legal right rather than simply breaching it. She spent her lunch breaks, late evenings, and even early mornings, burrowing through dusty tomes. She discovered forgotten rulings from the early 20th century, cases heard by judges long deceased, argued by lawyers whose names were now footnotes in history. She meticulously read handwritten marginalia, traced the evolution of legal concepts through decades of obscure case law, searching for that one subtle twist, that particular phrasing, that aligned with her intuition. It was a slow, painstaking process, like sifting through sand for a single, precious grain of gold. During her solitary research, Maya often encountered Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the firm's elderly legal librarian. Mrs. Vance was a kind, observant woman with sharp eyes behind her reading glasses. She had been with Sterling and Thorne for over 40 years, a living archive of legal knowledge. She noticed Maya's unusual dedication, her quiet diligence, a stark contrast to the often superficial enthusiasm of other interns. Mrs. Vance often brought Maya cups of herbal tea, her silent support a comforting presence in the vast library. She recognized the quiet fire in Maya's eyes, the intensity of her focus, and a flicker of something she'd seen in only a few truly exceptional legal minds. One afternoon, as Maya was poring over a dusty volume of obscure maritime law from the 1950s, Mrs. Vance approached her. Still digging through the past, "Dear," she asked gently, her voice a soft murmur. Most of the young ones prefer their digital screens. Less dust. Maya looked up, a faint flush on her cheeks. I have a feeling this case isn't as straightforward as it seems. And sometimes, the oldest keys open the newest doors." She pointed to a cryptic note scrawled in the margin of a case discussing the bona fide use of fishing rights. It seemed utterly irrelevant, yet Maya sensed a deeper principle at play. Mrs. Vance merely smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. Indeed, the law, like history, often repeats itself, but in different costumes. You have a knack for seeing through the disguise, don't you? She watched Maya, recognizing her unusual talent for connecting disparate legal threads. a form of intuitive pattern recognition that transcended conventional database searches. This was her helper moment, her subtle acknowledgement of Maya's unique ability. Around the same time, Alex Chen, a bright, newly minted associate, was assigned to oversee the interns working on the Innovatech case. Alex was a good-natured, empathetic young lawyer, often tasked with the less glamorous aspects of case management. He had witnessed Julian Sterling's public dismissal of Maya's idea and, though he couldn't openly defy Sterling, he harbored a quiet respect for Maya's diligence. He often found Maya buried in the antiquated library, a stark contrast to the other interns glued to their computers. One evening, as Alex was wrapping up, he found Maya hunched over a collection of ancient property dispute cases, still on that malicious intent tangent. "Maya," he asked, trying to sound casual, but a hint of genuine curiosity in his voice. "Sterling's team is running on fumes trying to find something in modern IP law." Maya, her eyes shining with a quiet intensity, looked up. "I think I'm getting close." "Alex, it's not about direct malicious intent in a patent, but about the spirit of how a competitor uses publicly available information to circumvent a patent without technically infringing. A kind of legal bad faith. There's an old case, a 1927 copyright dispute involving sheet music and a seemingly unrelated fair use doctrine. The court ruled that even if the notes were slightly altered, the intent to exploit the original creator's work without proper acknowledgement constituted a form of infringement, because the alterations were minor enough to show circumvention rather than true independent creation. She explained it with startling clarity, drawing connections that seemed wildly tangential on the surface, but held a profound logical consistency when viewed through her unique lens. Alex, initially skeptical, listened intently. He was a product of modern legal education, steeped in contemporary precedents. But as Maya spoke, connecting seemingly irrelevant dots, a rural water rights dispute from the 19th century, a forgotten bankruptcy case involving trade secrets, and now, this obscure music copyright case. He felt a chill. The way she wove these disparate threads together, revealing a common underlying principle of deceptive practice, was unnervingly brilliant. He realized Maya wasn't just searching, she was seeing the law in a way he, and likely Sterling, couldn't. He began to understand that her unconventional approach was actually incredibly insightful, reaching back to fundamental legal principles that were now often overlooked in the rush for speed and specialization. When Maya finally found the precedent, a dust-laden 1927 ruling, Patterson v. Harmonic Arts Co., a seemingly obscure copyright dispute involving minor alterations to sheet music, she felt a surge of exhilaration. It wasn't a direct patent case, but the court's nuanced interpretation of intent to circumvent a creator's rights, even without overt infringement, was a powerful, if archaic, parallel to Innovatech's situation. It was the one legal precedent that could win the case, if argued correctly. Armed with her discovery, Maya, her heart pounding, requested a brief meeting with Julian Sterling. She walked into his opulent office, a monument to his success, carrying only the slim marked volume of Patterson v. Harmonic Arts Co., and a few pages of handwritten notes. Sterling, perched behind his massive mahogany desk, barely looked up from his glowing tablet. "Yes, intern, I trust you're not here to offer more fanciful theories for the Innovatech case. We are past the brainstorming stage. This is crunch time." His tone was clipped, dismissive, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Mr. Sterling?" Maya began, her voice quivering slightly, but gaining strength as she continued. "I believe I found a legal precedent that could be crucial. Patterson v. Harmonic Arts Co., a 1927 copyright case. It addresses the concept of intent to circumvent, even when direct infringement is not proven." Julian Sterling finally looked up, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. He snorted, a derisive sound. "A 1927 copyright case, intern. Are you serious? We're litigating a multi-billion-dollar tech patent dispute. Are you suggesting we cite a ruling about sheet music from the Roaring '20s? That's utterly irrelevant, antiquated, and frankly, Amateurish. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. This is precisely why interns are kept on grunt work. You lack the judgment, the experience, to distinguish between a historical curiosity and a viable legal strategy. Now, go back to the archives. Focus on tasks relevant to someone of your limited understanding. He even turned to his senior partner, who had just entered the office, and chuckled. Our intern here thinks a 1927 music case will save us from apex innovations. The innocence of youth. Eh? His actions were a blatant public humiliation, designed to crush Maya's confidence and reinforce his own intellectual superiority. This act cemented him as the Type A antagonist, a man whose profound arrogance and disdain for anything outside his established framework threatened to sabotage his own success, and the very case he was supposed to win. Maya stood there, clutching the book, her face burning. The rejection was brutal, but the fire of conviction within her refused to be extinguished. She knew she was right, even if the most famous lawyer in the city couldn't see it. The seed of the unseen connection had been planted, and now it was ready to blossom, whether Julian Sterling liked it or not. The hallowed halls of Sterling & Thorne LLP, typically a bastion of calculated composure, now crackled with an almost frantic energy. The multi-billion-dollar Innovatech versus Apex Innovations intellectual property lawsuit had escalated, consuming the firm's top legal minds. Attorney Julian Sterling, once the picture of unflappable confidence, now sported faint shadows under his eyes, his crisp suits looking slightly less pristine. The opposing counsel, led by the notoriously aggressive Julian Vance of Vance & Associates, was relentless, dissecting Sterling's arguments with surgical precision and presenting compelling evidence of Apex Innovations' independent development. The firm's cutting-edge AI legal research tools, which Sterling so heavily relied upon, had yielded no definitive silver bullet. Every conventional avenue seemed to lead to a dead end. The case had moved into its critical, final phase in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, a towering edifice of justice in downtown Manhattan. The courtroom itself, with its soaring ceilings and heavy oak benches, felt less like a legal arena and more like a coliseum where careers were won or lost. This was the gauntlet for Sterling & Thorne, a symbolic battleground where their reputation, Julian Sterling's legacy, and the very future of Innovatech Solutions were all on the line. The tension within the courtroom was palpable, a suffocating blanket of anticipation and dread. On the sidelines, observing from the back rows reserved for junior staff, sat Maya Rodriguez. She was a silent observer, meticulously taking notes, her social anxiety a constant companion, but now almost secondary to the intellectual urgency gripping her. She watched Sterling's increasingly strained demeanor, the worried glances exchanged by the senior partners. She knew, with chilling certainty, that her obscure 1927 precedent, Patterson v. Harmonic Arts Co., held the key. It was a truth that hummed in her mind, a beacon in the gathering legal gloom. The case was going badly. Julian Vance, a formidable litigator with a reputation for merciless cross-examination, systematically dismantled Sterling's expert witnesses. Innovatech's groundbreaking neural network technology, while innovative, had enough subtle similarities to Apex's earlier, unpublished research to create a strong impression of infringement. Julian Sterling's usually dazzling arguments felt less incisive, his rhetorical flourishes less impactful, as he struggled against the weight of the evidence. He was relying on pure technical distinctions, arguing a meticulous lack of direct, line-by-line code infringement. But the jury, already weary, seemed swayed by Vance's narrative of corporate theft. In the firm's war room, late into the night, the atmosphere was grim. Pizza boxes lay scattered, coffee cups overflowed, and the air was thick with the scent of stale desperation. Julian Sterling, typically radiating an aura of untouchable brilliance, looked defeated. His tie loosened, his usually immaculate hair disheveled. "We're out of options," he muttered, pacing the room like a caged lion. Vance has painted us into a corner. The technical arguments aren't landing with the jury. We need something. Something that shifts the narrative beyond mere infringement. Something about their intent. His words struck Maya like a lightning bolt. Intent. The very concept he had so scornfully dismissed from her weeks ago. Now, in his moment of desperation, he was unwittingly echoing her own discarded idea. It was a bitter irony, but also her ultimate opportunity. In that room, filled with the most brilliant legal minds of Sterling and Thorne, Maya felt utterly alone in her unique understanding of the solution. No one else had seen the subtle connection. No one else had delved into the dusty archives where Patterson lay dormant. The legal teams had exhausted every avenue within the conventional framework of modern intellectual property law. They saw a wall. Maya saw a hidden door. But to open it, she would have to overcome not just Julian's ingrained skepticism, but her own crippling fear of asserting herself in such a high-pressure, intimidating environment. Her internal conflict raged. Every fiber of her being screamed to stay silent, to let the powerful lawyers sort out their own mess. The thought of Julian Sterling's cutting remarks, his public humiliation of her just weeks ago, made her stomach clench. But the image of Innovatech, a company employing thousands, facing potential ruin, flashed in her mind. More importantly, the core principle of justice, of seeing the spirit of the law applied, compelled her. This wasn't just about a firm's reputation. It was about preventing a corporate bully from getting away with what she perceived as an unethical, albeit technically veiled, act of circumvention. She knew that presenting a 1927 copyright case about sheet music in a multi-billion-dollar tech patent trial would be met with ridicule, perhaps even open hostility. It was a colossal risk, but it was the only risk left, and Maya, with a quiet strength born from her conviction, knew she had to take it. She just needed a way to approach Sterling, to cut through his pride and convince him that the answer lay in the very naive idea he had dismissed. The pressure intensified with each passing hour. The judge had set a strict deadline: final arguments, and any new evidence or precedents must be submitted by the end of the next day. There will be no further extensions, the judge had stated, his voice stern. We will proceed to closing arguments promptly. The clock was ticking, a relentless countdown to what seemed like an inevitable defeat. Maya knew she had to act, and fast. She had to formulate a concise, compelling argument for Patterson's relevance, one that would cut through Sterling's ego and the firm's desperate exhaustion. She spent the night in her small apartment, foregoing sleep, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unwavering determination. She annotated Patterson with furious precision, drawing intricate diagrams, connecting its archaic language to the cutting-edge tech patents. She meticulously outlined how the intent to circumvent principle, established nearly a century ago, could be adapted to argue that Apex Innovations, despite minor technical alterations, had clearly intended to exploit Innovatech's core innovation without truly inventing their own. It was a legal acrobatics, a leap of faith across decades of legal evolution. But Maya saw the clear, logical path. She thought of Mrs. Vance, her quiet support, her belief in Maya's knack for seeing through the disguise. She thought of Alex Chen, his nascent respect. These were the sparks of affirmation that now fueled her courage. She knew this was her ultimate test, not just of her legal acumen, but of her ability to stand up for her convictions, to risk everything for a truth she alone could see. The grand stage of the federal court awaited, and Maya, the overlooked intern, was about to step into the spotlight, the unlikely champion of a lost cause, armed with nothing but a forgotten precedent and her unwavering belief in the spirit of justice. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the biggest case of Sterling and Thorne hung precariously on her shoulders. The hushed tension in the federal courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. The air, usually circulating with professional detachment, now crackled with the raw electricity of high stakes. The multi-billion-dollar Innovatech vs. Apex Innovations case was winding down. and the odds looked grim for Julian Sterling and Thorne. Cassandra Vance, the opposing counsel, radiated an almost predatory confidence. Her every cross-examination a perfectly aimed dart, her every argument a logical hammer blow. Julian Sterling, for all his legendary brilliance, was visibly strained, his usual unflappable demeanor replaced by a tightly controlled frustration. The conventional legal strategies had been exhausted, and the mountain of evidence against Innovatex seemed insurmountable. In a last, desperate huddle during a brief recess, Julian Sterling's team presented their final, bleak assessment. "We've hit a wall," Julian, a senior partner, admitted, rubbing his temples. "Their evidence on independent development is compelling. The jury isn't buying our technical distinctions on infringement." Julian, his face pale, ran a hand through his hair. His eyes, usually sharp and focused, darted around the room, searching for an answer that wasn't there. He had dismissed Maya's idea weeks ago, had even publicly ridiculed it. But now, in the chilling silence of impending defeat, the words echoed in his mind: malicious intent, unethical application, a subtle twist on that principle. He remembered the conviction in her quiet voice, the way her eyes had shone with an almost unnerving certainty. The very concept he had scorned now felt like a desperate, flickering lifeline. With a heavy sigh that was almost imperceptible to his team, Julian turned to Maya, who stood quietly at the edge of the huddle, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and profound determination. "Intern," he said, his voice low, a hint of grudging desperation in his tone. That old case you mentioned, Patterson v. Harmonic Arts Co. Are you certain of its relevance? Is there anything there that could possibly connect to this?" It was a concession, a reluctant plea for salvation from the very person he had scorned. Maya felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. Her moment, despite her pervasive social anxiety. The clarity of the legal argument, the sheer conviction in her discovery, propelled her forward. She didn't preen, didn't gloat. She simply spoke, her voice gaining strength and clarity as she outlined her meticulous research. "Mr. Sterling, Patterson isn't about direct patent infringement. It's about the intent to circumvent an established right, even through technically legal means. The court focused on the spirit of the law, not just the letter. Apex Innovations, while not copying code line for line, has designed their neural network to achieve the same result as Innovatex, specifically exploiting the concept and functionality without true independent innovation. Patterson provides a framework to argue that such deliberate circumvention, even if technically legal, constitutes a form of unlawful exploitation of intellectual property." She laid out her argument with a concise, compelling logic, citing specific passages from the 1927 ruling, drawing intricate, undeniable parallels between archaic sheet music and cutting-edge AI. Julian stared at her, his initial skepticism battling with a dawning awe. The connections she drew were audacious, unconventional, but terrifyingly logical. He saw the path, narrow and risky, but undeniably present. "It's a long shot," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "But it's the only shot." He looked at his team. "We're pivoting. Get ready." Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere was fraught. Julian Sterling, having made a sudden, unexpected request to present new legal precedent, stood before the judge. Maya sat just behind him, a quiet presence, but her mind was a whirlwind of precision. As Julian began to speak, he would subtly glance back at Maya, and she would respond with a fleeting nod, a minute shake of her head, or a quick, almost imperceptible slide of a small, handwritten note across the table. Every word Julian uttered, every nuanced argument he presented, was subtly, but effectively, guided by Maya. She was his unseen co-counsel, the silent conductor of his performance. Julian launched into his new argument, boldly introducing Patterson v. Harmonic Arts Co. He explained the historical context, then masterfully pivoted, drawing an intricate, compelling parallel to the Innovatech case. He argued that Apex Innovations had engaged in a deliberate strategy of circumvention, designing their technology to achieve the same functional outcome as Innovatech's patented network, simply by making minute, non-substantive alterations, a strategy that, under Patterson, constituted an actionable intent to exploit, even without direct infringement. Cassandra Vance, the opposing counsel, reacted immediately. She rose from her seat, a sneer on her face. "Objection, Your Honor. This is outrageous. Opposing counsel is attempting to introduce a wholly irrelevant, antiquated 1927 copyright dispute about sheet music into a multi-billion-dollar tech patent case. This is pure desperation. Your Honor, an attempt to distract from their lack of evidence. They are clutching at straws, relying on the naive theories of an intern who clearly doesn't understand basic intellectual property law." Her words were sharp, accusatory, designed not just to dismiss the precedent, but to publicly humiliate Julian and Maya. The murmurs from the gallery grew louder, the expressions on the faces of Julian's own firm members turning to a mixture of embarrassment and doubt. This was the moment of ultimate peril, the apex of tension where everything threatened to collapse. But Maya did not flinch. Her heart hammered, but her mind was crystal clear. She had anticipated this exact counter-argument. Even as Vance spoke, Maya's eyes were already darting across the worn pages of her Patterson volume, then to a cross-referenced 1930s appellate review she had discovered, hidden in its footnotes. She found it a small, almost throwaway line in the appellate judge's decision that clarified Patterson's applicability beyond copyright, specifically mentioning its underlying principle in cases of deliberate commercial exploitation through artful evasion. Faster than thought, Maya scribbled a precise note, citing the exact page and line number from the obscure appellate review, and discreetly slid it across the table to Julian. Julian, his face tight with renewed tension from Vance's attack, saw the note. His eyes quickly scanned the reference, a flicker of understanding, then a surge of renewed confidence, transformed his expression. He straightened, addressing the judge directly. "Your Honor," he stated, his voice now booming with renewed authority. "The esteemed opposing counsel misunderstands the very essence of Patterson. This ruling, as clarified in its appellate review, established a broader legal principle of deliberate commercial exploitation through artful evasion, a principle that transcends the specific nature of the original property. It is precisely this principle that defines Apex Innovations' actions here." He then eloquently tied the obscure appellate clarification to the specific, complex details of Innovatech's technology, exposing the calculated, deceptive nature of Apex's alleged independent innovation. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The judge, a notoriously stern and meticulous figure, leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Julian, then on the pages Maya had referenced. His expression, initially skeptical, slowly morphed into one of profound engagement, then undeniable impressment. He scribbled furiously, taking notes. Cassandra Vance's confident sneer evaporated, replaced by a look of utter shock, then dawning horror. Her face paled as she realized the depth of the trap Julian, guided by Maya, had just sprung. She had dismissed the ancient precedent as irrelevant, but Julian's brilliant application, fueled by Maya's unseen insight, had just turned her triumphant narrative on its head. Her face, once a picture of smug satisfaction, was now contorted with a mixture of profound shock, bitter defeat, and an almost physical sense of utter humiliation. She slumped into her chair, defeated. The murmurs from the gallery now shifted. The legal journalists, initially bored by the antiquated precedent, were now scribbling furiously, recognizing a historic turning point. The senior partners of Sterling and Thorne, who had watched with growing despair, now looked at Julian with renewed awe, and then, slowly, their gaze shifted to Maya, sitting quietly behind him. Their expressions transformed from doubt to sheer astonishment, then to unreserved, open admiration. They saw not just a brilliant legal strategy, but the quiet, unassuming intern who had provided the very key to victory. The judge, after a long, thoughtful pause, cleared his throat. "Mr. Sterling," he announced, his voice resonating with grave approval, "your argument, supported by this, indeed fascinating precedent and its appellate clarification, has introduced a compelling and novel interpretation of intent within intellectual property law. The court will take this into serious consideration." It was a clear signal of their victory. The scales of justice had tipped, not by the force of conventional arguments, but by the precise, quiet intervention of an unseen genius. Maya Rodriguez, the unassuming intern, had, in a climactic moment of intellectual brilliance, single-handedly turned the tide of the biggest case, vindicating not only herself, but the enduring power of profound, overlooked knowledge. The seismic shift in the courtroom resonated far beyond the federal building in Manhattan. The judge's pronouncement, echoing Julian Sterling's daring argument, was not just a legal victory. It was a profound vindication. A ripple effect that spread through the hallowed halls of Sterling and Thorne LLP and the wider legal community. The Innovatech versus Apex Innovations case, once teetering on the brink of defeat, was now a stunning triumph. All thanks to the quiet brilliance of an overlooked intern. For attorney Julian Sterling, the victory was bittersweet. While his reputation as a legal titan remained intact, even enhanced by the audacious win, the internal tremors were undeniable. He had faced the very real prospect of a devastating loss, a blow that would have tarnished his legendary career. He couldn't escape the humbling truth he had been utterly, profoundly wrong. His arrogance, his unwavering faith in conventional methods, had nearly cost his firm and his client billions. The realization gnawed at him. He saw Maya, not as a subordinate, but as a silent savior. The firm's internal postmortem was intense, while no public statements were made. Julian faced a discreet but pointed review from the senior partners. His initial dismissal of Maya's precedent was heavily scrutinized. He acknowledged his error, not just to the partners, but in a very rare public moment during the firm's celebratory press conference following the verdict. Standing before a phalanx of cameras and eager reporters, Julian Sterling, known for meticulously controlling every narrative, did something truly uncharacteristic. "This victory," he declared, his voice firm, "was not solely due to my efforts. It was the result of extraordinary, unconventional legal insight brought to light by one of our brightest minds, Ms. Maya Rodriguez, an intern who saw a connection where the rest of us, myself included, failed to look." The statement sent shockwaves through the legal world. As a legend publicly credited a previously unknown intern. For the misguided members of Julian's team, those who had scoffed at Maya's naive theories or simply ignored her quiet presence, the impact was immediate and profound. Many of the younger associates, particularly those who had subtly mocked her, felt a deep sense of shame. They had been blinded by their own career ambitions and adherence to firm hierarchies. They witnessed Maya, the unassuming intern, achieve what their collective brilliance could not. Over the next few weeks, Maya's desk, once a quiet outpost, became a destination. Lawyers who had barely acknowledged her existence now sought her out. Several junior associates, including Alex Chen, who had been a quiet supporter, approached her with genuine apologies. Maya, one of them, a notoriously condescending associate named Mark, admitted, his face flushed, "I was completely wrong. What you did, it was incredible. You saw something none of us did. I'm truly sorry for ever doubting you." Some even offered to help her with her workload, or to collaborate on new research projects, demonstrating their repentance through tangible acts of support and respect. The previous atmosphere of dismissiveness had completely dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of admiration and a willingness to learn from her unique approach. The ripple effect of the Innovatech victory quickly reached beyond Sterling and Thorne. Maya's name, initially whispered, then openly discussed, became a quiet sensation in New York legal circles. Firms known for their aggressive headhunting reached out, but Maya's loyalty and a newfound sense of purpose lay with Sterling and Thorne. Within days of the verdict, a formal offer arrived. It wasn't just a promotion. It was a clear signal of her rising star. Maya Rodriguez was offered a full-time associate attorney position at Sterling and Thorne LLP, complete with a generous salary, a comprehensive benefits package, and a clear path for rapid advancement. This was more than a job offer. It was a recognition of her singular talent, a testament to her inherent value. The firm, known for its traditional structure, was effectively creating a new role for her, one that would allow her to specialize in complex, precedent-breaking research and strategy, giving her the autonomy to delve into the obscure corners of law where her unique intuition thrived. This opportunity allowed her to harness her talents in a professional environment that now truly respected her, empowering her to impact justice in a profound, meaningful way. She would be able to pursue cases that demanded deep research and creative, unconventional thinking, much like the one she had just won. Weeks after the dust settled from the trial, the frenetic energy of the firm had subsided into a new, productive hum. Maya, now an official associate, was settling into her new, spacious office, the Manhattan skyline glittering outside her window. One evening, as the city lights began to twinkle, Julian Sterling, looking remarkably less stressed, knocked on her open door. He held 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Mind if I come in?" "Maya?" he asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. He entered and handed her a mug, the warmth seeping into her hands. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Maya said, a faint smile on her face. Her social anxiety, while still present, was now a manageable hum, no longer a roar. Julian took a seat opposite her, leaning back, a rare expression of humility on his face. "Maya," he began, his gaze steady, "I owe you an apology. A proper one. My arrogance, my blind faith in what I thought I knew, nearly cost us everything. I was so focused on the shiny new tools that I forgot the fundamental truths. And I dismissed you, and your brilliant insight, in a truly unprofessional manner. For that, I am genuinely sorry." Maya looked at him, surprised by the raw honesty in his voice. "It's okay, Mr. Sterling," she replied. "It was a high-pressure situation." "No, it's not just okay," he countered gently. "It's a lesson, a profound one. You showed me that true legal genius isn't just about raw intellect or cutting-edge tech. It's about seeing beyond the obvious, about connecting disparate ideas, about having the courage to trust your intuition, even when everyone else, including a famous lawyer, tells you you're wrong." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "You spoke of unseen connections when you started here. I thought it was metaphorical. Now I realize it's your superpower." Maya hesitated, then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, decided to share a part of herself. "I've always had a difficulty with social situations, Mr. Sterling. A lot of anxiety. But when I'm deep in research, when I'm connecting these dots, it feels like the noise fades away. It feels like truth. And sometimes, those tiny overlooked details, those dots that no one else sees, are where the greatest power lies. The legal system, after all, is built on details." Julian nodded slowly, a newfound respect dawning in his eyes. "Indeed it is. And you, Maya, have an unparalleled gift for uncovering them. It's a quiet strength, but it moves mountains." Their conversation was not just a resolution to past conflict, but a deep shared reflection on the essence of legal work, the balance between seasoned experience and fresh innovation, and the crucial role of humility in the pursuit of justice. The new calm that settled over Maya was more than just professional security. It was an internal peace, a profound sense of being seen, valued, and finally, truly understood. 3 years later, the towering facade of Sterling and Thorne LLP still commanded a formidable presence in the Manhattan skyline. But within its gleaming offices, a quiet revolution had taken root. The firm, once a bastion of rigid hierarchy and conventional brilliance, now pulsed with a more inclusive, dynamic energy. At the heart of this transformation was Maya Rodriguez, no longer the timid intern, but a respected and formidable associate attorney, known throughout New York's legal circles for her uncanny ability to unearth the unseen connections that others missed. Maya's office, though still modest compared to Julian Sterling's sprawling suite, was a hub of quiet activity. Her desk was often laden with obscure legal texts, historical case files, and intricate diagrams mapping out complex legal genealogies. She had cultivated her own robust client list, specializing in high stakes, intricate cases that demanded unconventional thinking and meticulous research. The very kind of cases where her unique talent truly shone. Her social anxiety, once a crippling force, had receded into a manageable hum, a quiet background noise she had learned to channel into laser-sharp focus. She spoke with a newfound confidence in meetings, her arguments delivered with a quiet authority that belied her years, compelling her colleagues and even seasoned judges to lean in and listen. Her life, once marked by internal struggle, was now rich with purpose and profound professional satisfaction. Yet, Maya knew her journey was not merely about personal success. The memory of the Castillo family, of Julian Sterling's initial dismissal, and of countless other instances where the letter of the law had trampled over the spirit of justice, fueled a deeper conviction. She felt a profound responsibility to leverage her unique gift, not just for corporate clients, but for those whose voices were often drowned out by the system. Driven by this conviction, Maya spearheaded the establishment of the Justice for the Unseen program within Sterling and Thorne. It was a pro bono initiative, funded by the firm's profits and championed by a surprisingly supportive Julian Sterling. The program specialized in taking on cases where vulnerable individuals or small communities were exploited due to obscure legal loopholes, or where justice seemed to be perpetually just out of reach due to complex, often overlooked, legal technicalities. Every quarter, Maya personally selected a handful of these challenging cases, dedicating a significant portion of her time to them. She personally mentored the firm's new interns, teaching them her unconventional approach to legal research. "Don't just look for keywords," she would instruct, her voice calm but firm, pointing to a labyrinthine legal document. "Look for the missing dots, the spaces between the lines, the footnotes that seem irrelevant, the cases that were decided decades ago, in seemingly unrelated fields. Sometimes, the most powerful truths are found in the quietest whispers of the law, in the forgotten corners of precedent." She emphasized the importance of empathy, of truly listening to the stories of the marginalized, and of using their legal talents to be advocates for those who lacked a voice. Her goal was to ensure that no one else would suffer the injustice of being overlooked by the very system designed to protect them. One bright, late afternoon, as the sun streamed through the expansive windows of a federal courtroom, casting a golden glow on the polished wood, Maya Rodriguez stood at the counsel table. She wasn't delivering a thunderous summation or engaging in dramatic cross-examination. Instead, she was quietly, meticulously, guiding a young intern, a bright but nervous law student named Michael, through a complex pro bono case involving a wrongful eviction. She pointed to a small, almost microscopic detail in an old property deed. "See that phrasing?" "Michael," she murmured, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "It's a remnant of a 19th century real estate custom. On its own, it's just historical boilerplate. But when you connect it to the 1903 county zoning amendment, and then to the 1952 appellate, ruling on implied easements in rural properties," her eyes, sharp and focused, held a deep understanding of the legal landscape, a vision that could pierce through layers of complex jargon to find the core of justice. Michael, initially overwhelmed, nodded slowly, a dawning comprehension in his eyes as he saw the invisible lines connect. Just a few feet away, observing from the gallery, sat Julian Sterling. He wasn't there for a case, he was simply watching. A faint, proud smile touched his lips as he observed Maya. He remembered the timid intern, the naive ideas, his own colossal arrogance. Now, he saw not just a brilliant lawyer, but a profound teacher, a true beacon of justice, molding the next generation with a wisdom he himself had only recently begun to fully appreciate. The case concluded with a quiet, undeniable victory for the evicted family, a testament to Maya's unique insight and the program she had built. As the courtroom cleared, Maya walked over to Julian. "Good work." "Maya," Julian said, his voice sincere, free of any past condescension, "you continue to amaze me." "And the firm." Maya offered a genuine smile. "It's what we do, Mr. Sterling." Finding the justice in the details. Julian nodded, his gaze sweeping over the now empty courtroom, a place of triumphs and defeats, of hidden truths and exposed lies. "Indeed," he mused, "and you, Maya, have a way of making sure those truths are always found, no matter how deeply buried." His eyes, filled with deep respect, reflected the golden light of the setting sun. The story concluded not with a booming crescendo, but with the quiet, persistent hum of justice being done. Maya Rodriguez, once dismissed, had become a living legend, not through grand pronouncements, but through the profound, unwavering power of her unseen connections, forever ensuring that the scales of justice, even in the most complex of cases, would truly be balanced. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.